The Crimson Moon pack house stood on a hill above the forest, its stone walls old and strong, built by wolves who had ruled that land for generations. Inside, Alpha Damon Blackwood sat at the head of a long table, listening to his council argue about hunting grounds and border patrols. He nodded when he needed to nod. He signed papers when he needed to sign them, but his mind was somewhere else, as it always was these days. 3 years earlier, Damon had married Elena Rhodes because the moon goddess willed it. On the night of his 18th birthday, his wolf had caught her scent across a crowded hall and dropped to its knees before he even saw her face. That was how fated bonds worked. No warning, no choice, just a pull in the chest that could not be denied. Damon had never wanted it. He already loved someone else. Her name was Celine Marsh. They had grown up together, chasing each other through these same woods as children, sharing secrets under the same old oak tree as teenagers. Celine was not his fated mate. The bond between them was ordinary, human, in its simplicity, built from years of shared laughter and stolen kisses behind the training grounds. But ordinary did not mean weak. To Damon, it meant real, chosen, his, in a way that Elena could never be. So when the moon goddess handed him a wife he had not asked for, Damon accepted his duty with his hands and his title, but never with his heart. He gave Elena a room in the pack house, a place at his table, and the name of Luna. He did not give her anything more than that. Elena noticed the coldness from the very first week. She noticed the way Damon's eyes moved past her when she spoke in council meetings, the way he left the room whenever she tried to talk about anything beyond pack business, the way he never once asked how her day had gone. She noticed, and she grieved quietly, in the hours after midnight when the pack house had gone silent and there was no one left to see her cry. But grief did not suit Elena for long. She was the daughter of a beta from a small northern pack, raised to believe that a wolf's worth was measured by what she built, not by what she was given. So instead of waiting for a husband who would not look at her, Elena began to look at everything else. She started with the ledgers. The Crimson Moon Pack's finances had been managed carelessly for years, money spent on things no one tracked, and debts owed to neighboring packs that nobody remembered to repay. Elena spent her nights teaching herself the numbers, and within a year, she had organized every account, cleared every unnecessary debt, and built a small reserve of gold that the pack had never had before. Then she turned to the pack's relationships with its neighbors. The Ashwood pack to the east had once been enemies of Crimson Moon, until Elena sat across from their Luna one autumn afternoon and found that they shared the same love of old stories and honest conversation. What began as a diplomatic visit became a friendship, and that friendship became a treaty that kept both packs' borders safe. She did the same with the Stonebrook pack to the south and the Hollow Pines pack to the west, until Crimson Moon was surrounded not by rivals, but by allies who trusted the quiet Luna who kept her word. The warriors noticed her too. When young wolves came to her with disputes too small for the alpha's attention, Elena listened patiently and settled them fairly. When an argument between two senior fighters threatened to turn into a real fight, it was Elena who stepped between them, her voice calm but certain, and both men backed down out of respect rather than fear. Slowly, without meaning to, she became the person the pack turned to when something needed fixing. Damon saw none of it. He was too busy in the cabin at the edge of the territory, where Celine lived in comfort that Damon paid for with pack funds no one questioned, because Elena had quietly covered the gaps. He visited her most evenings, sat by her fire, and told himself that this was the life he deserved, even if the goddess had denied it to him. It could not stay hidden forever. Word travels fast among wolves, carried on the wind and in the glances of pack members who see more than their alpha realizes. By the second year of the marriage, most of the pack knew about Celine. They said nothing to Damon's face, but they watched Elena more closely after that, wondering how she carried herself with such steadiness when everyone knew what she must have known. Elena did know. She had known for a long time. She could smell Celine's scent on Damon's clothes when he returned to the pack house late at night. She could see the guilt he never quite managed to hide in the mornings. But Elena said nothing, not because she was weak, and not because she had accepted it, but because she was waiting. She did not yet know for what. She only knew that the moment would come, and when it did, She wanted to be standing on solid ground when it arrived. So she kept building. She kept working. She kept becoming someone whose worth did not depend on whether her husband ever chose to see it. The moment came at the founding ceremony, the yearly gathering where the entire Crimson Moon Pack came together to honor the wolves who had first claimed this land centuries ago. It was the most important night of the pack calendar, attended by wolves from every allied territory, including the very packs Elena had spent 3 years building friendships with. Damon stood at the front of the Great Hall in his ceremonial coat, and for reasons that even he could not fully explain afterward, whether it was pride, or foolishness, or simply exhaustion from hiding a truth everyone already knew, he decided that this was the night he would stop pretending. He raised his hand for silence, and the hall quieted. Elena stood beside him in her Luna dress, her bond mark pendant resting against her collarbone, unaware of what was coming. "I have something to say," Damon announced, his voice carrying across the hall. "For 3 years I have honored a bond the moon goddess placed on me. But a bond is not the same as love. Tonight, I am naming Celine Marsh as my second, and I ask the pack to prepare for a formal separation between myself and Elena." The hall went silent in the way that only true shock can create. Elderly wolves who had seen decades of pack history stared at their alpha in disbelief. Young warriors turned to look at Elena, waiting to see how she would break. And then something happened that no one in the hall could ignore. The bond mark on Elena's wrist, a mark that glowed soft silver in the presence of a true mate bond, began to fade. It flickered once, twice, and then went cold and gray, the color of ash. Every wolf in that hall knew what that meant. A mate bond does not simply weaken from neglect. It breaks only when one party's wolf gives up entirely, choosing to release the bond rather than continue suffering beneath it. Elena felt it happen inside her chest, a strange and sudden quiet where 3 years of aching pain had lived. Her wolf had finally let go. She did not cry. She did not shout. She reached up, unclasped the Luna pendant from around her neck, and set it gently on the ceremonial table in front of the entire assembly. Then she turned and walked out of the great hall, her steps steady, her head high, leaving behind a silence so complete that even the fire in the hearth seemed to hold its breath. Damon told himself, in the days that followed, that he had done the right thing. He moved Celine into the pack house. He introduced her to the council as his second. He waited for life to feel the way he had always imagined it would, once he was finally free to choose his own heart. Instead, everything began to fall apart. It started with the borders. Within 2 weeks, messengers arrived from Ashwood, Stonebrook, and Hollow Pines, each carrying the same quiet message. Their alphas had heard what happened at the founding ceremony, and out of respect for the Luna who had built those alliances with her own hands, they were withdrawing their treaties. They were not declaring war. They simply no longer felt bound to protect a pack that had discarded the woman who earned their trust. Crimson Moon's borders, safe for 3 years, were suddenly exposed on every side. Then came the finances. Celine, thrust into a role she had never trained for and never truly wanted beyond the title itself, could not read a ledger the way Elena could. She spent freely, assuming the treasury Elena had built would simply refill itself. Within a month, the careful reserve Elena had saved began to disappear, and no one remaining in the pack house knew how to stop the bleeding. The warriors grew restless next. They had followed Elena's calm judgment for years, and now, watching Celine attempt to settle disputes with impatience and pride instead of fairness, several senior fighters began to question whether Damon still deserved their full loyalty. 2 challenged him outright in the training yard, testing an alpha strength that had once been unquestionable. And that strength, Damon discovered, was no longer what it used to be. A mate bond, even a resented one, is a source of power for an alpha wolf. When Elena's wolf released the bond, something in Damon weakened alongside it. He felt it in his muscles during training, in the slower speed of his shift, in nights when his wolf whimpered beneath his skin as though something vital had been carved away. He had told himself for years that the bond meant nothing to him. Only now did he understand how much it had been holding him up. Celine, meanwhile, grew tired of a role that brought her nothing but the council's disapproving stares, and a pack that never warmed to her the way it had warmed to Elena. The romance that had once felt like rebellion, like something stolen and precious, began to sour under the weight of real responsibility. Within 2 months, she was gone, slipping away in the night with no explanation, leaving Damon alone in a pack house that no longer felt like home. It was in that emptiness, standing in the great hall where he had once humiliated his wife in front of everyone he governed, that Damon finally allowed himself to see the truth. Elena had never been the burden the goddess forced upon him. She had been the foundation beneath everything he had taken credit for. The safe borders, the full treasury, the loyal warriors, all of it had been her work, done quietly, without praise, while he spent his nights at a cabin, pretending none of it mattered. He found her 3 weeks later at the Hollow Pines Pack, where she had been welcomed not as a broken, discarded Luna, but as a respected guest. She had already begun advising their alpha on treaty matters, her reputation for fairness and steady judgment having followed her there long before she arrived in person. She looked well, rested, certain of herself in a way Damon had never seen before, not even in the earliest days of their marriage. He asked to speak with her, and she agreed, though only in the presence of her hosts, in the open courtyard rather than anywhere private. Damon knelt before her, not as a husband, but as one alpha acknowledging another leader's strength. "I was wrong," he said, and the words felt smaller than the years of silence they were meant to answer for. "Everything that fell apart because I never saw what you were building. I want the chance to earn it back. Not the title, not the bond, just the chance to prove I understand now what I threw away." Elena studied him for a long moment, the wind moving through the courtyard between them. "I spent 3 years believing my worth depended on whether you noticed me," she said finally. "I don't believe that anymore. I built something real without your love, Damon, and I will keep building, whether you're part of it or not." She paused, and something in her voice softened just slightly, not with forgiveness, but with honesty. "I will consider your apology. That is more than you gave me. But my loyalty isn't something you can assume back into existence. If you want it, you'll have to earn it, the same way I earned everything you lost." Damon nodded, understanding, for the first time in his life, that some things could not be commanded by rank or bloodline or the will of the moon goddess. Respect had to be built, patiently, honestly, the way Elena had built everything he had once ignored. He rose from his knees and returned to Crimson Moon that same night, not with promises of a reunion, but with a plan to become the kind of alpha and the kind of man who might one day deserve to stand beside her again. The road ahead was long, and there were no guarantees at the end of it. But for the first time since the night his wolf had first caught Elena's scent across a crowded hall, Damon finally understood what he was walking toward and why it mattered.